Okay, Ronan, welcome to the Toast Talks podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. This was my podcast, popping my podcast cherry for actually being in one. Obviously, I listened to them, but this is something a bit new for me.
Good. Well, we'll try to make it as an enjoyable experience as possible. So, you're chartered accountant, auditor, insolvency practitioner, north and south. Anything else you like to keep yourself busy with?
Rescue diver, dad, loving husband.
And which one's the hardest out of those?
Probably the loving husband.
But so you're a native of the Northwest.
Yes.
And you've lived here.
Yeah, well, I lived here. I was born and bred here. One of six boys. Very proud of Derry. But I have obviously went to St. Columb's College.
Perfect. Right.
Proud of that too. And then after when I did my A-levels, I had a sort of choice of university. Could have gone to Dublin or to Edinburgh, but I tossed a coin. It was sort of harp or salmon.
Gee, back in the punt days.
Back in the punt days. That's true. So tossed it, and it came up harp, and so Edinburgh University it was.
Excellent. How was your experience in Edinburgh?
It's very good, actually. I think I had this intention of actually that I was going away for 4 years. That's what I was doing, and then I was going to go away, get my degree, and come back. But so that 4 years I blinked, and it was 14 years that I ended up away. But it was a good experience, so I can't fault it.
From your degree, you 14 years in Edinburgh, so you obviously finished the degree and went. It started your career then, obviously. Then.
Yeah, I mean, I got a degree in business studies and accounting, and I applied on the milk round in
very
my final year. It was very good. It was much a relief because I had my job started in October of my final year, whereas a lot of my friends were, doing finals and dissertations and still applying for jobs at the same time, and I didn't have to worry about that, which was, as I say, a relief.
Nice to leave university employed.
The milk round I applied for was the sort of the big six accounting firms. I applied to four of them, got 4 first round interviews, and I've got my job with Pricewaterhouse, which is where I wanted. So I didn't even take the second round interviews.
And so that kind of kicked off a new round of exams, obviously. So they require you to work and study. So how did you find that?
Well, I mean, the chartered accountancy, the traditional route, if you like, is you get a contract and you work for the firm, but at the same time they support you through the exams. You get block release, you get exam support and mentoring. So you work very hard, but at the same time you have to balance that. The study with the sort of the work life. There was times that particularly during what the big firms term the busy season. For the year ends, that you're leaving the house 7 a.m. You're maybe back at 7 or 8 at night, and then you hit the books after that, and then you're so that was. But that's just the way of it. It was expected.
So I mean. So once you qualified then, so your career developed. So can you talk us through just what happened after that? So
when you qualify as a chartered accountant, quite often you get approached by headhunters and for jobs, and glamour jobs in the Caribbean, and sort of less glamour jobs in sort of perhaps in Moscow, which I seem to remember was one of them. But it's actually. A lot of people go out into industry at that point, so they leave effectively accountancy practice and go into industry. I decided to stay on. Not only did I stay on in practice, I stayed on with my training firm at that stage. So I stayed with Pricewaterhouse for a few years. They during the time they merged with Coopers and Lybrand. So the big four became the big five at that point. So it was and Pricewaterhouse became PwC. I do remember my mother sort of phoning me up and breaking the news to me. Actually, she was complaining that I hadn't told her, and of course I was at that level. No one told me, but my mum knew before the employees.
So I take it that was just the amount of work that you had at the time.
Well, it was, and it was just a function that they didn't need to tell us at the time. You're just staff. Get on with your work.
Yeah, and how? So from Pricewaterhouse, then you moved.
After a couple of years, I decided I had been doing the traditional kind of audit type roles. I had been doing some sort of what's termed specials, transactional work and stuff, and consulting. And I felt that I wanted a bit of a new challenge. Now I had spent a long time, probably about 18 months, working on the demutualisation of Scottish widows, which
big firm,
which big, but it was very interesting, and it gave me a different kind of skill set. So I wanted to further that, and I went to Anderson, as then what had been Arthur Anderson. It became then Arthur got dropped. It just became Anderson, so I was at Anderson for a couple of years after that. Now I would point out that I didn't do an audit for Anderson, but I think it turns out with the Enron debacle, there's a lot of people didn't do an audit for Anderson, even the auditors perhaps.
So for any of the younger listeners, you can look up Enron to see what exactly happened.
Well, Enron was a large energy trading firm in Texas, based in Houston, Texas. There's a good documentary called "The Smartest Guys in the Room." If you ever get a chance, you can watch that. But basically, it's people are more likely to encounter it these days in sort of textbooks in terms of a case, business school case study. How Anderson, which was a global firm with 90,000 employees. And I think at that time it was like $5 billion in revenue, how it basically disappeared in 6 weeks because of reputation. Its reputation was damaged irreparably, and that it just meant that for a firm in professional services, really all you have is your reputation, and when that goes, everything goes with it. So
safe to say, a good learning lesson that reputation's everything.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was at the time with Anderson, I was working on a with Equitable Life on a 425, Section 425 restructuring. It was actually the largest corporate restructuring in the UK at that stage, trying to restructure 40 billion of liabilities. And I was working long hours on that. And so it was. I remember getting the FT was in the office, and tended to be half the front page was about Enron and Anderson, and the other half was about Equitable Life. And I kind of felt at the time I was probably the only person connected to both those sides of the front page. But it was. All I could do was just focus on the job in hand, put my head down, and keep focusing on what I had at the client side. But I do remember coming back to the office the day that effectively people in Anderson realised the gig was up, and I came through the doors, and the team that I was with, there was a small consulting team, and they were sitting with their feet up on the table, and I was kind of going, "What's going on, lads?" And somebody said, "Listen to your voicemail," and there was a voicemail broadcast system that the firm had.
Obviously, before email at this stage.
No, we still had email. I'm not that old. No, we had email, but this was how how they communicated. Messages, and it started to become a bit more frantic in that period as Enron unraveled. Right. And I think that, but I listened to the message, and I kind of realized at that point that the gig was up. Now,
so literally, you went from good job, good salary to nothing within.
Well, no, it's not quite like that, because we didn't. It's not. It makes it sound like I worried. I didn't worry in the slightest. And as the team that we were with, we moved as a team to as it was Ernst & Young, now EY. So we we had spoken to a few other parties, and there was E&Y was it made more sense for now that the rest of the Anderson in the UK joined Deloitte's.
Right. Okay.
We joined EY, but it was we were kind of outliers. I do remember actually somebody phoning from Deloitte's phoning me and wanting to talk to me about my pension, and I was kind of going, you do realize I didn't join Deloitte's, I joined EY. So,
okay. But you then, so you had another, how many years? So what age you started? Whenever Anderson went down, you were what age?
Now you're asking me. It was, I think that's probably 20 years ago. That's actually, it seems so fresh. And yet now that you've just asked me that, that'll be why it features in business school case studies rather than more fresh memory. And that also your comment, your cheap shot about emails. But it was, it was very, the Chinese have a saying, may you live in interesting times. And historically, I always thought that was a blessing. But in actual fact, I did realize that the Chinese, they actually mean it as a curse. So yeah, those times were perhaps a bit too interesting. Yeah. But I mean, I had good experience with Price Waterhouse. I had a good experience with Anderson, notwithstanding the the demise. I worked with great people. You learned a lot. They were really sort of dynamic, and you fed off each other, and you learned so much from working with those people. And actually, EY was the same. They were they're really good people.
Now, and you were actually posted a couple of different places.
Yeah,
was your role, so you got to travel a good bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, the ones that trip off the tongue are, I remember, working in Zurich for 6 months, or working in New York for 8 months, but Paris as well, London, Dublin, those types of ones, they stick in the memory more than maybe Croydon or Halifax, or no disrespect to people from Halifax or Croydon, but it's just it was more. It's more glamorous, but I do remember sort of traveling over and back to Zurich.
But you're still in your 20s here, and you're getting the opportunity to.
Oh, totally. So you're actually, when you listen to sort of people, maybe careers advisors, or you listen to, recruiters for firms, and they're saying about, going down the chartered accountancy route, and and this is it's a global passport and all that, and you kind of think, sure, whatever. You're not at that stage. You're not really listening to it. But in actual fact, when I look back at the time that I had in New York, the time that I had in Zurich, I mean, going to Paris on an assignment as chef de mission, when I had filled in on my CV that I spoke French, and then not forgot about it, or forgot about it totally. Until 5 years later, when somebody goes, we've done a search of the database, you're a French speaker, I just went, zut alors. Or I probably said merde. But I had to, so it was good experiences. It was very, I think a testament to a life lived, or a career. Worked is would you change it? And on my career side, there's very little that I think I would go back and change. I might, if I could go back, I might sort of tip off the guys in the Houston office that they have to audit things.
Maybe take another look at that.
Yeah,
but so you had kind of Big Four corporate job, based in Edinburgh, and then you kind of make the decision to transition home to the family business, essentially.
Well, I think when I said about that, I was away for 4 years, or I had always intended to come back to Ireland and to come back to the Northwest. It never really occurred to me that I wouldn't.
But from a security side, so you had this bag, you had a job, you had the.
But that's the funny bit. You've said that about but when Enron that went down, you never feel insecure, and that again comes back to what the recruiters or the people trying to promote the Institute of Chartered Accountants, when they're saying about sort of employment within qualified chartered accountants is 97%. I never actually felt that and in actual fact, there's colleagues that I remember sort of putting them in touch with people that I trained with, putting them in touch with recruiters in various parts of the world. So the guys I trained with in Edinburgh, I knew that some of them are in Sydney, some of them are in Auckland, some of them are in North America, some so no one ever really, you never felt like
there was ever going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Well, but you did transition home then, and
that was. I mean, it was all partly for sort of personal reasons, maybe rather more than career reasons. But there was a McCambridge Duffy established sort of family firm, and my father sort of pestered the life out of me to come back. As I said, I've one of 6 boys, and I think he had sort of visions that sort of his sons would take over the mantle, and we have. But so it was totally different challenge. I do remember going from a corner office on the 32nd floor overlooking Times Square to a ground floor a desk shared with my dad that looks over an electricity substation, and I do remember going, oh my God, what have I done? So, but in actual fact, that aside, I've no regrets. So.
And the ethos of McCambridge Duffy was kind of fairly, installed already by the time you had come here, and.
Yeah, definitely. But I think because it's a family firm. I've used that term family as not just sort of myself and my brothers, but it's a that extends to the employees. It's that and a lot of the ethos does come from my late father. And it does come down to that. Do the right thing by the debtor, do the right thing by the creditor. And everything else will work itself out. And that's really has been the focus.
And how? So obviously, being a family-run firm, and 6 brothers and 4 is it work there? How is it working with family? And obviously,
it's not. I mean, people can. Maybe I don't know. I mean, we're not the Waltons or anything, and I don't mean the Walmart ones. I mean the TV show ones. But we've no significant. I can't really point to anything sort of any major issues. There's the odd heated discussion, but it's nothing. It's amongst. We all have the same ethos, and we all have the same values, to my mind. Mm-hmm. Darrell went away and trained with Pricewaterhouse as well, and so I think and Connor's been here since since the time of Moses, I think. So he just seems part of the furniture. But so I don't think that we all have the best interests of the firm at heart. We all have, and I don't think we've never run the business very ruthlessly. I think we could have run the business ruthlessly. We probably could have made more money doing it. But you have to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning. You have to, and I think the ethos that I've spoken of, how that we live and breathe that every day. And I do think that so perhaps that transition, I think what you're talking about was easier because it came from our upbringing and our family. It was something
the good values.
It was those values that you slot back into, that you're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
We never set out to be the biggest firm in the industries that we just set out to be the best. And I think we do it we haven't gone any. We've been, people have offered to buy us out. People have offered, big sort of financial backing to explode here, there. But we've always just done things in a bit more quiet, sort of organic way, and tried to do it that way. And I think that has worked out. But I do think it, a lot of it, as I say, stems from my late father's sort of values.
Yeah, and so currently employed somewhere around 140, is it? Something like that.
140, 145, something like that.
Okay. And does any pressure come with that, or feel any sort of sense of responsibility?
Well, it's funny, actually. I was considering this recently. When I was with, Price Waterhouse or Anderson or EY, you consider your career, and you're very focused on your careers. And I had sort of career plans in 5-year bites, and that worked. I don't think since I left EY I've had a career plan at all. And instead of focusing on my career, or you're thinking about 140 careers,
Sure.
and again, my brothers are no different in that respect. You do not think about yourself. And this makes it sound like all sort of altruistic and whatnot, but it's just different. It's a different level,
different set of priorities.
It's different, and a different level of responsibilities as well. So it is different that you don't think about your own career.
And I think people have these kind of aspirations to be kind of business owners and company directors, and maybe they whenever they set out in these journeys, they don't fully appreciate that there are kind of sides where that kind of can add pressure to what you're doing.
It's the human side of it. And I think I don't know if it's perhaps because we work in insolvency, we're a bit more live to that. We do see that sort of the human impact and the human aspects sort of in the raw very much day. Because when say a director speaking to us about a company in difficulties, it's very personal to them, and it's like they're they're at their most vulnerable, and they're exposed. An individual who's faced with bankruptcy, likewise, they're worried about the family home, they're worried about how they're going to provide for their family. So it's things like that. So we do see those human aspects a bit more, as I say, raw. I think that for the employee side of it, you do think, you do start to think that, when we grew up, it still is, actually, I was going to say, Derry was like an unemployment sort of black spot. It still has the worst employment rates in the UK and Ireland. So it's you do feel that level of responsibility of those people who are going home and and they're paying they're paying their rent, they're paying their mortgages, they're paying they're providing for their kids. So that level of responsibility, it's somehow it gets turned up to 11.
And so if we touch on that, then, so have there been any kind of significant challenges, or what's been the darkest moment, I suppose, for you? Every business kind of has ups and downs. So have there been any that kind of you significantly remember?
I think there have been some. I mean, we've looked to grow organically. Some of the changes that some creditors had introduced, had adversely impacted us, dramatically, and we had to, at one stage, we had to scale back, and that was, we did have to let some people go. That was, very sort of painful, difficult times. However, I think because we weren't trying to do the big bang, flash in the pan, because we were trying to do it organically, although that was difficult, within sort of 6 months to a year, we probably had the headcount back up to where it had been.
Sure,
so I think for recollection, we had to let like 15 to 20 go at a stage, but now we're way past where we were then. So it was almost like a small cut to to cure it,
to save the patient.
Yeah. So,
and that obviously it's an extremely difficult decision, and obviously one that you would have struggled with at the time. But it was always the balance between kind of it's you know, it's necessary at this point so that we can expand further in the future, and it worked out, and you said you've increased the headcount since. So
yeah, I mean, again, working in insolvency, because you see things at their most vulnerable and their rawest, you know, when you get to help those in those situations, you get to save that business. You know, those are great days. The dark days that you have, you know, I can remember some, you know, where you're appointed administrator of a company, you know, and you try to save the company, but then you know, it becomes apparent that you're not going to be able to, and then you have to let those people go. You know, sort of letting 40 or 50 people go at a stage. You know, those are really, really dark days. You know,
how do you manage to actually stay positive in that? You know, is it just?
I think. Well, I mean, I'm very optimistic by nature, but I think that insolvency tends to hit the press when it's bad news. It tends to hit the press when when the business fails and it goes into some sort of statutory insolvency. Yeah. What doesn't hit the news is where the business has got a bit of help and has been saved, has been turned around, and you actually save
success stories.
It's those success stories that don't, you know, we know them, you know, and so it's those that make you that keep you going. It's those that you know, that counterbalance and provide a sort of if you like that foundation you need to deal with those days when you have to let you know, employees go. I remember we let it was a company that it couldn't. It's peculiar. It couldn't be saved for a. It had good products. It had you know, it had a good company, but it couldn't be saved because the staff were all long serving, and that there's a legislative aspect about that meant the business wasn't very attractive because the staff had such long, you know, it's around 2p and stuff, but it's basically nobody wanted to buy the company because they'd have to take on those responsibilities, and that's a legislative sort of flaw to my mind that you know, hampered that insolvency situation. So the employees had to were all let go on the Friday, but I remember being in the car park at the premises on the Monday morning, and a guy drove in, and as they had done every morning for the last 40 years, you say, and he drove in and he looked across and saw us stand, and he just like realised that, you know, he'd just come to work as a Monday morning as usual, and he'd, you know, but Friday had been his last day. And again, it was no fault of his, you know. So.
But you say, so it is very, the success stories obviously outweigh the...
Oh, definitely. And when somebody comes to you and they have an issue and they have a problem, and you know, quite often you can see the path through the trees, but they can only see the wood. And I do get a kicks, maybe not the right word, but I do get sort of a satisfaction out of where, you know, somebody comes back afterwards and says, you know, it all turned out exactly as you said it would, and I kind of go, yeah, well, you know, that you know, we could see what you couldn't see, if you like. Yeah. So and you know, so that I do get a satisfaction out of that, and so helping people when they're at their sort of darkest, helping companies when they're at their bleakest, that is
does it annoy you that it is only the negatives that are publicised, or is it something that I suppose it's just the nature of the job?
I think it's kind of the nature of it. You know, I mean, if you know, if you went sort of public, if you like, with some of the, you know, people aren't going to come to you because it's a, you know, it seems some sort of breach of confidentiality, but also you know, you may adversely impact that business if it was made public. I do. So I don't really begrudge or worry about it, provided you know, provided we know about it. Then, you know, kind of feel you can look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and keep going.
I think the personal pride keeps you
definitely.
So we've kind of touched on chartered accountant, auditor, insolvency practitioner. So assists companies north and south of the border. But in addition to that, then you've obviously touched on it as well. You've company director, partner in the firm, but then also father of four. So if we look at how you actually divide your time between all of that, you must be incredibly disciplined to silo everything.
It is a challenge, and I think it's even more of a challenge in thanks to COVID and working from home. Because it was easier when you drive to the office. Maybe drop the kids off on the way to school or whatever. You drive to the office, you're there, and then when you come home, it was very difficult when the kids were, homeschooling, and you were trying to work from home as well, and there was no sort of, if you like, that delineation or demarcation, and I did find myself, I found that a challenge. I found, if you like, the drive home from the office gives you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to clear your head, to clear your thoughts. When you don't have that, when you step out of your home office and into the kitchen, and then I did find myself sort of drifting back in sometimes, and
you're too accessible.
Well, yeah, but I did remember reviewing some files at midnight, and then sort of sent it off. I got it from a colleague at midnight. He was obviously doing the same problem, the same thing as I. Yeah. I then reviewed it. We sent it on, and then the client the next morning just replied, "You guys are nuts," and I thought they have a point, actually. So,
and how has that changed with COVID? Have you managed to kind of set rules or something?
I think it took us all a little while to try and evolve with that. It's funny, you said about the different roles. I don't think that. I think that at work, where you're sort of people do as as you say, and it's a bit easier to work with people, and because they're all adults and stuff. When you have 4 kids, they don't do as you tell. My boys are teenagers, and it's like, I'm definitely not the boss. So it was like, but they. But no, they're good, but it's a different set of challenges, obviously. But it's so trying to I try and make sure that work, you switch off, you leave work behind, and then you focus on family, which realistically is the most important.
It's the most important thing. And you've throughout your career, you've kind of always kind of continued to learn and develop and stuff. How important do you think that is for your role in your business, but also you personally? You seem, I think, extremely academic and qualified. So
well, no, it was actually I remember getting at my college days, getting the commitment award rather than the academic award, because there was a guy in their class who had the brain the size of a planet. I always felt it. But yeah, commitment award is thanks. But
you tried, but you're not as good as him.
No, but I never was. But he was some sort of genius. But I do think my personal development, you get as your career moves, it is incredibly important.
Yep.
Do bits that interest you, do bits that you think will further your career, do bits that will challenge you. And I think that in the working from home environment is actually much easier, because you drop into webinars that you perhaps, if you're in the office, you wouldn't necessarily be going to that seminar. But I've dropped into lots of sort of webinars. I had one recently where there was sort of judges in insolvency courts in different jurisdictions having a discussion, and that was, there's no way I'd have been exposed to a Singapore judge just talking with an Australian judge and a New Zealand judge about the cases that they dealt with. So those types of things are easier in the working from home environment. But I think you always need to challenge yourself and develop. Now, I think my wife sort of calls me some sort of insolvency geek or nerd.
Is that even worse than an accountancy geek?
Well, probably. But I think that you do in insolvency. You learn something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you didn't, if I don't learn something new every day, I think I'd be surprised. So it's how it evolves and how it changes. And I enjoy sort of looking at other jurisdictions and comparing them, and and I think the Irish personal insolvency arena is an example. Sort of 15 years ago, it didn't exist. They asked McCambridge Duffy to meet with the Law Reform Commission, and sort of one of my brothers and myself, we went and met with them and tried to, and we kind of helped shape some of that legislation and stuff. But so I enjoy looking at sort of other jurisdictions and seeing, comparing and contrasting, and it's like there's certain things that do work and certain things that don't. And but I think seeing the Irish insolvency, personal insolvency regime sort of evolve over the last sort of 15 years has been sort of, again, challenging for the grey matter.
And so we're kind of in a very good era, although there's been kind of a lot of negatives that you were saying about COVID, but it does seem to have kind of channeled some people's inner entrepreneur, and there's a lot of people now who are kind of wanting to progress and set up a firm on their own. What kind of advice would you have to somebody who's kind of setting out on that journey now, and what to expect, I suppose?
It's like, expect the unexpected, it's like, but I think it is a challenge, but it is hugely rewarding. And I think they just need to, go for it, I think that you're talking about, entrepreneurship, but I think that the pandemic has driven a lot of innovation, even things that, that within the insolvency arena that had, been like that for years and years and years, things that we'd been asking for years and years, and sort of dealing with certain government departments and so forth, and you were told it couldn't be done. Suddenly with COVID, it's taken 10 years for them to say no, but it took sort of 3 weeks for them with us working at home to say yes. So I think it is amazing times in some ways, in that the innovation that and the notion that I think we've all now realized that working from home was a possibility. Maybe going back to the office, it's going to be in some sort of hybrid type situation, but that the working from home aspect of it, I kind of wonder how the pandemic would have looked very different. I think sort of if it had been 10 or 15 years ago.
Sure, yeah.
Because the broadband wouldn't have supported it, we wouldn't have had a lot of that. But now people, can, have a cottage in Donegal and have clients in London, have clients in New York, and so they can get that work-life balance perhaps better than they otherwise might. But you can Zoom or use Teams or whatever to drive your business and of with your clients, and face to face.
Never have to meet them,
and you perhaps never have to meet them. So it's like it's sort of perfect for introverts everywhere. But I do think that I think part of it, the video calling is actually something that I find. Because it's now got to the point that if somebody phones me, I find myself sort of looking for, where are they? Where's the picture? And looking to the nearest screen.
Just it adds so much more engagement when it's a video call as opposed to just a normal audio call. But just because you've got so much experience, I suppose, from the business side, you see kind of the implications of it going wrong. But what would you think, or how important do you think it is for kind of, people who are starting out in business or they have a business to, like how often would you look at kind of financial information or kind of, sort of information on numbers in particular? Do you pay kind of close attention to that?
I think definitely you have to pay close attention, and you have to make sure that it's right. And I think that's sort of just part and parcel of of risk management for yourself is that you're insulating yourself. Keep an eye on the cash flows, keep an eye on the bank balance, keep an eye on. But at the same time, you kind of got to trust. One thing that I have realized is perhaps to trust your gut, your gut instinct a bit. And I think that quite often I get surprised that my gut instinct will tell me it's X, and then I spend quite some time sort of beavering away at the figures, and it comes back and might not be X, but it's close enough. You know what I mean? So I do find that was a kind of educational piece. So you will know your business. You will you need to keep an eye on it, but at the same time, speak to people about making sure that you're structured the right way, making sure that you manage your risk the right way. I think from the insolvency perspective, we see when businesses, when it doesn't go to plan, but I don't think that it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the business. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh God, it's a terrible scenario. It's something that you deal with and you move on. I think
you make some adjustments.
The Enterprise Act in the UK was brought in by Peter Mandelson after he'd visited Silicon Valley, and he was amazed by sort of people sort of going bust one day and sort of setting up the next day. And the expression that in America you're not a success unless you've been bust twice. It kind of seems and if we look at sort of who in America has been through some sort of insolvency, even sort of throughout Henry Ford and sort of Walt Disney and and so forth, and sort of 4 US presidents. 5 maybe if you include if you're including the corporate failures of Mr. Trump. But it's
the innovation that it allows the innovation and taking that risk and getting the reward as a result.
I mean, I don't think you should let fear of failure hold you back. It's like it's like, oh, I'm not doing this because what if it goes wrong? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if it goes right?
Yeah.
And
be the eternal optimist.
And if you can drive the business, you can drive it from keep an eye on the books, keep an eye on the cash flows, etc. Trust your gut and trust your innovative flair. I think that that's a key message for anybody setting up in business.
Excellent, Ronan. Listen, I think we could go on for ages and have loads more questions, but listen, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been absolutely excellent.
Thank you. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting being grilled rather than grilling. So thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.